This episode is brought to you by Helamite brand low sticks, the most luscious and light smoking low that you can get your hands on. Satisfy your cravings without sacrificing your throat. Hey there, scabby scummers and gangers, Crimson Oracle here, and today I'm going to be giving you a rundown of the vehicle rules from the Necromunda Ash Waste rulebook. I got my copy last week and immediately set about working on what it took to get a Rolling Roads game going. On Saturday night, I took some made-up vehicle rules that I threw together for trucks and cars, and my friends and I decided to play the road race scenario from this book, and it was bonkers. It was phenomenal. It's the best game of Necromunda I've played all year, and I have played some fun games of Necromunda this year. It was transcendently good. And it's really funny because I don't think I would have enjoyed it if I had just played with the models that came in the box set. Because the buggy rules are kind of They only have 2 hull points. They're incredibly weak armored. It's just not a very interesting vehicle. It does not show off the mechanics well. So I kind of, went off-roading a little bit, so to speak, and did my own thing. And let me tell you, if the new vehicle rules that are coming in Book of the Outlands are at all like the durable machines of death that I created for this race, the game is going to be a blast. In fact, I would go so far as to say that the vehicle rules in Ash Waste are solid enough to be played as an exclusively vehicle game. Like, you could potentially have a variant of Necromunda that was a 28mm Gaslands. Easily done. I would play in a campaign like that tomorrow. It would be a very different kind of game. You'd have to make some adjustments. You definitely need the vehicle upgrades and stuff that we know are coming. But it's going to be, it's good stuff. I'm going to have a battle report of that particular game at some point in the next week. I'm also going to show off how I made my Rolling Road board in a build video this week. I was going to wait and do one more Can Train video for the Battlefield on a Budget series, but I'll be honest, the last Can Train video is just kind of dull, and I think people are excited to see the Ash Road. So I'm going to do that video next, and then we'll do another board that I made. I made 2 boards last week, next week. So in the meanwhile, I want to talk about how vehicles work in this edition of Necromunda. So I went through the rule book and took several pages of notes on all of the vehicle rules that I could find. Unfortunately, the book is only available as a print edition right now in the Ash Waste box set. I think this is by far the worst way to access rules for a game. You have to manually search through page after page to find new rule references or changes. You have to scour various areas to find out whether or not there's something covering the way something interacts with the vehicle, because you don't know, because it's all new stuff. So I could not ask more strenuously for GW to put these rules into an ebook so that I can actually search for them, because paper books are just not user-friendly when it comes to being used as like a reference for rules. I don't understand why you would put a book out only in a paper format, but that's kind of an aside, but I wanted to mention it because it's enough of a game breaker for me that I'm going to have to write. I've been typing up every single rule from the rule book into a document, because there's just no situation where I'm going to play with a paper book while I'm at the gaming table. That's crazy. So it's been a lot of work just to even find every vehicle reference in here. And I may have missed some because, of course, I'm rereading rules that I've already read a million times. And then sometimes they're reworded slightly. And then sometimes they contain added text about vehicles. And when you add it all up, it gets a little bit hard to keep track of everything. And, it's easy to kind of start skimming and miss stuff. So I've gone through a bunch. I think I've got everything that I've picked out of here in the content for this. But if I miss anything, let me know in the comments. I will, be doing another video in the future about the new rules, and I'll make any notes of anything I missed there. And of course, I should mention, if you like the content you see in this and other videos, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. That is how these videos get more attention. So vehicles work a lot like regular fighters. The biggest difference is that obviously a vehicle has can have more than one crew. In that case, they have multiple vision arcs based off of where those crew can see. You have the front arc, there are the side arcs, and you have the rear arc. And you can do that by drawing an X over top of the vehicle that kind of controls where those 2 points are. And this enables you to figure out where guns can shoot. I searched through the book a bunch to see if there was any specific explicit explanation about guns being able to swivel or any of that stuff, and there wasn't. It seems like the gun fires from the arc that it's pointed at on the model, and it can't move to fire in other arcs. I believe that's the way it works. If anyone can find a reference to something that overrules that or changes that, I would love to see it. But I only have access to this one book in a poor format for this kind of searching, so I wasn't able to find any specific information beyond that. So the way I'm playing it, the way other people will probably play it for now, is that a vehicle is able to shoot in the one facing that the weapon is located in. Vehicles also have statuses. A vehicle status is based off of whether it is moving or not. So there is mobile, which means that the vehicle is able to fully move around. There is stationary and stalled, which is a vehicle that is forced to stop by an attack, damage, or other effect, and it prevents it from being able to move. They can often fire weapons in that situation, but they have to take an action in order to restart the car. You actually also test in the end phase of each round to see if the vehicle restarts, so you're not completely out of luck. You could use a shooting attack in order to target your opponents and then still potentially restart the vehicle in the following phase, assuming, of course, that you are facing the enemy, because you can't pivot or turn around while you are while you're stalled out. And then, of course, there is wrecked vehicle. A wrecked vehicle can no longer make any actions, and it is simply treated as terrain. Unless otherwise noted, conditions don't affect vehicles. I have made a note of all the places where it does say that they affect vehicles, but I also am not perfect. So, if I miss anything, let me know. The blaze condition, when that is activated, the vehicle suffers a strength 3, AP -1, damage 1 hit to its rear, but you roll the location as normal. And then you make a cool check. If you pass, you can activate as normal. If you fail and are mobile, you count as having failed the loss of control test, which means that your vehicle is going to go swerving in some random direction. And then if you fail and you are stalled, you have to do a burnout double action, as the fighter apparently tries to restart the vehicle frantically because it's on fire. When you get hit with an attack with the blind rule, you have to make a handling check to avoid becoming blind instead of an initiative check. Concussion also affects vehicles. They are -2 to handling checks, and vehicles can be hidden, but they do lose their hidden marker for a turn when they move, and they absolutely cannot be affected by web weapons. Unfortunately, there isn't anything mentioned in the vehicle damage section of the rulebook that addresses whether a vehicle is able to take damage from a gas or a poison attack or toxin attack. I have to assume that gas and toxin weapons are not going to cause vehicle to take damage based off of it not being covered at all, and them not having a strength. And the vehicle steps are very clear about it being based off of strength. Vehicles have slightly different characteristics than other fighters. They still have a move characteristic, obviously, but rather than a single toughness value, they have front, side, and rear toughness. They have hull points instead of wounds. They have a handling roll, which is used when making various checks around making maneuvers and such. There is a save value built into the vehicle, and then of course you have some of the normal stats that regular fighters have representing the crew. There's ballistic skill, leadership, cool, willpower, and intellect. Each of the toughness values corresponds to the various arcs that the vehicle can be shot from. They have hard points that can be equipped with weapons available to that vehicle, and it's possible, or it may be possible, to purchase additional hard points to add to a vehicle depending on the vehicle. And there is no limit to the amount of war gear that can be applied to a vehicle, but some cannot be combined, and that is noted in those rules. Each vehicle has a finite number of upgrade slots for its body, drive, and engine. When adding an upgrade, you can either replace an old one or you can attempt to salvage it, which you roll a d6. On a 1 it's destroyed, and then on a 2 through 6 it's moved to the stash and can be installed in another vehicle. Vehicles have their own sets of actions which work differently from fighter actions. So when a vehicle is mobile, for example, there's the move simple action. You move the vehicle up to the distance of its movement characteristic straight forward. You can also make a single pivot of up to 90 degrees, either at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of your move. And you can cross gaps no wider than the vehicle is long, as long as the starting point isn't lower than the destination. And you can cross terrain features. There's also the maneuver simple action. You can move either forward or backwards at half movement, make any number of pivots up to 90 degrees before or after or during movement. Move and shoot is a basic action. You can move like a move simple action up to half your movement distance, and you can make a ranged attack at any point in that movement with one crew, weapon, or sidearm. You cannot use the fire all action and the move and shoot action in the same turn. The fire all basic action allows you to make one ranged attack with each crew weapon at their firing arcs. The reload simple action allows you to pick a crew weapon or weapon that the crew are equipped with and make an ammo check. If it's passed, it's reloaded. There's the aim basic action. If you make a fire all action after that, you add +1 to hit rolls. There is the drift basic action. Move up to half the distance in a straight line from side arc, and when finished, make a loss of control test at +1. There is the ram double action. A vehicle can move up to its full distance, adding d6 inches. If a vehicle or terrain feature is hit, the vehicle itself halves its distance for the hit that it suffers, while the impacted vehicle is hit as normal. There is a spin basic action. You make a move, but you can turn up to 180 degrees instead of 90. After completing the turn, you take a loss of control test. And then, of course, there is a full throttle double action. The vehicle can move as if it's making a move action, but can go up to 3 times its movement characteristic. If it turns at any point, immediately make a loss of control test at -1. If a vehicle is stationary and stalled, you can attempt to jump start, which is a simple action. The driver tries to restart the vehicle. You make a handling check and you add +1 if it has more than 1 hull point. If passed, the vehicle's status is changed to mobile. If failed, it stays stalled. There is the turnover basic action. The vehicle can move up to d3 inches and gains +1 to its next jumpstart test. And there is the freewheel action. The vehicle moves d6 inches, but you roll a d6. On a 1 to 3, it rolls forward, and on a 4 to 6, it rolls backwards. If it collides with anything, work out damage based off of the distance that it moved. Fire all, same as mobile. You are able to fire all of your weapons. Wrecked vehicles, meanwhile, no longer participate in the battle. The crew has gone out of action, any fighters on board have been thrown clear, and the vehicle is treated as terrain for the rest of the battle. It doesn't gain a ready marker and cannot make any actions. Broken vehicles. If a vehicle breaks, then you follow the following actions. If mobile, you make a break for air double action, move 3d6 inches with no limit to pivots, attempting to, in order, be more than 3 inches from enemies, be out of line of sight of enemies, be in cover, be as far from enemies as possible. If stationary, you do a burnout double action, place D3 smoke markers within 1 inch of the vehicle, suffer -1 to restart tests from each marker. Vehicle impacts. Running over a fighter. If a moving vehicle contacts a fighter's base, move them the smallest amount possible to let the vehicle pass. Make sure the fighter isn't within 1 inch of the vehicle's final location. Make an initiative check for each fighter. +1 if they're standing, and if they are seriously injured, it is a 6-up only to succeed. If they pass, the fighter dodged, but if they fail, they become prone and pinned and take an automatic hit from the collision damage table. If a vehicle hits another vehicle or terrain, you use the collision damage table that I am showing you on screen right now. As you can see, a fast moving vehicle is able to do an extraordinary amount of damage with a collision. Head-on collisions. If the front arc makes contact with another vehicle, it's head-on. Compare the toughness of the vehicles at the facing that they're impacting. If they are the same or the moving one is higher, the vehicle is pushed as far as movement allows. Roll for damage. If it's side on, that means the side arc of a vehicle makes contact with something else. You make a handling check at +1 if side toughness is greater than the toughness of the facing of the other vehicle. If you pass, the other vehicle is moved as small amount as possible to continue movement. If failed, the vehicle turns the smallest amount possible to continue the movement. Roll damage. Colliding with terrain. If a vehicle hits a wall or impassable terrain, it's treated as if the vehicle hit something with greater toughness. Impassable terrain does not suffer damage, but if the object or obstacle is a light structure, it is destroyed, and any fighters on it fall, and the vehicle is treated as hitting a lower toughness vehicle. You roll damage anytime a vehicle comes into contact with something else. Both vehicles suffer a hit based off of the collision damage table against the facing that made the collision. You're going to use the damage table that I showed earlier. That is going to be based off of the movement characteristic of the vehicle rather than how far the vehicle has moved. This is important to note because assuming the vehicle is mobile, you might be hitting someone at only an inch or two, but it's based off of how fast the vehicle can move, not how fast it's currently moving. So a vehicle that can move 10 inches hits really, really, really hard. It can do a lot of damage. You also increase the strength, AP, and damage of the hit for the vehicle that has lower toughness in the event of a collision. Chain collisions. Vehicles can and do push each other into other vehicles and obstacles. If this happens, resolve the damage of each collision as they occur, using the initial vehicle's movement when determining the power of impact. All movement stops if a vehicle in the chain stops due to impassable terrain or a higher toughness vehicle. Vehicles in terrain. There are 3 different kinds of vehicles listed in the rulebook. There are wheeled vehicles. For every 1 inch of movement through difficult terrain, they count as having moved 2 inches. There are tracked vehicles, which suffer no penalty for difficult terrain. And there are skimmers, which ignore all difficult and dangerous terrain, but if it ends on difficult or dangerous terrain, they have to make a handling check, and if failed, suffer a catastrophic hit to the drive. Fighters on vehicles. Fighters treat vehicles as if it's terrain. When it moves, fighters that aren't in transport spaces must immediately pass an initiative check or fall off. If they fall, place them 1 inch from the vehicle in the direction rolled on the scatter dice. And if they land within half an inch of an edge, they must check initiative again or fall. If they would hit impassable terrain, move them the shortest distance possible where they can still be placed. Only test once per vehicle activation, but you test again if the vehicle takes a collision. Loot caskets automatically fall off unless placed in a passenger area or in base contact with a fighter that has passed their initiative check. Falling vehicles. When a vehicle falls, it must pass a loss of control test with a cumulative -1 modifier for every 3 inches, rounding up to the nearest inch. In addition, they take a hit based off of the height to rear toughness and drive location. Attacking vehicles. A fighter within 1 inch of a vehicle counts as being engaged, but can move freely without disengaging. +1 to hit a vehicle in close combat, and you can roll 2 location dice, choosing your preferred result since the fighter has a better access to hitting the vehicle. Vehicles never count as being engaged and can move freely, but when it does, enemies within 1 inch can make reaction attacks on a successful initiative check. Obviously, other vehicles can't make reaction attacks. Hits are scored against the facing they're in contact with. If on the vehicle, use the lowest toughness. If a fighter wrecks a vehicle in close combat, they can make a consolidate move. Vehicles and nerve tests. Take a nerve test if a friendly vehicle is wrecked within 6 inches. Make a cool check with +1 for each friendly vehicle within 6 inches that's not broken or wrecked. If failed, place a broken marker. They immediately activate, and if mobile, make a brake for air double action, or if they're stationary installed, make a burnout action. They lose their ready marker if they had one. They may attempt to rally. On subsequent turns, you must make a brake for air or burnout action as appropriate. Resolving hits against vehicles. So when you're attacking a vehicle with a ranged attack, you determine the facing, draw a line from the vehicle, and whichever side the center of the model's base is on is the facing hit. If the model cannot see the facing that they are targeting, the vehicle is considered hull down and counts as being in full cover. Roll to wound as normal, roll to save as normal, roll damage and location dice. This is where vehicles get super interesting. See, vehicles have their own damage charts. You can hit them in the body, crew, engine, or drive. And depending on where they get hit, there's a wide range of effects. And each hit, it does different kinds of damage, 3 different kinds. There's glancing hits, penetrating hits, and catastrophic hits. But here's where it gets cool. Weapons with multiple damage, they don't take a set number of hull points the way they do wounds. Instead, that determines the number of dice that you're able to roll, the damage dice, to determine whether it's a glancing, penetrating, or catastrophic hit. Which means that when you get hit by a weapon that's very strong, the odds of it doing serious damage go up, but it does not affect the total amount of damage that it does. It's still only 1 hit. This makes vehicles a little bit more resilient, especially if you start giving them a lot of hull points, which is what I did for my homebrew rules. If the location is somewhere impossible to hit on a vehicle, which will be noted in a vehicle's special rule, you re-roll the location dice. If a vehicle takes multiple hits from a rapid fire weapon, you roll a location for each hit, and then resolve each hit individually. And you roll damage dice equal to the damage characteristic, as I was just saying. 1 result is applied unless noted by another rule. So that is pretty dope. I think that this is really what makes the vehicle rules shine, because the vehicles they're able to take a lot of fire while still limping around, which is exactly what you want out of an armored vehicle in a firefight. If they blow up immediately, like the buggy will, they are not particularly interesting. There are, of course, 4 damage tables for the 4 locations, each with 3 different results. For the body damage, there are glancing hits, crew shaken, the crew becomes subject to concussion, and you make a handling check, and if failed, you become stationary and stalled. Penetrating hit, lose a hull point and make a handling check. If failed, you become stationary and stalled. And then catastrophic hit, weapon destroyed. Random vehicle weapon damaged and loses a hull point. If it has no weapons, you lose 2 hull points. Make a loss of control test. There's engine damage. If you take a glancing hit, you get stutter, which you become stationary or stalled. If you take a penetrating hit, there's lose power. You lose a hull point and cannot move further than movement during your activation. making a loss of control test as well. Catastrophic hit, belching smoke and flame. You lose 2 hull points, and for the remainder of the battle, you cannot move further than the movement during activation. Make a loss of control test. There is the crew damage table. A glancing hit is crew shaken. Make a handling check or become stationary installed. Penetrating hit, the driver is wounded. They take a flesh wound. They're at -1 ballistic skill and handling until the flesh wound is resolved. And in any end phase that a driver has a flesh wound, you roll a d6. On a 1, they pass out. Roll a driver blackout result, which is the next catastrophic result. Do not test to see if they recovered this round. 2 to 3, keep the flesh wound until next turn. And then 4 up, remove 1 flesh wound. And then the catastrophic hit to crew, the driver blacks out. The vehicle immediately loses control as if failing a loss of control test. Change status to stationary installed and remove ready marker. Do not add any ready marker until they regain consciousness. In the end phase, roll a d6. On a 1 to 3, the driver remains unconscious. On a 4 to 6, they suffer a driver wounded result, but do not recover this turn. There is the drive damage table finally. There is glancing hit, tank slapper, make a loss of control test, penetrating hit, a blowout, lose a hull point and -1 to handling tests, and make a loss of control test, and catastrophic hit. Major malfunction, lose 2 hull points and -2 to all handling tests, make a loss of control test. When it is reduced to 0 hull points, a vehicle is wrecked, or if a vehicle rolls during a loss of control test, it is also wrecked. When this happens, you leave the vehicle in place and treat it as terrain, as a flimsy structure, or it can be removed from the table if you don't want to do that. In any case, you roll on the lasting damage table for the vehicle and you roll on the injury table for the crew. Any models on board the vehicle that are not crew are thrown clear. As a result, they are placed within 2 inches of the hull of the vehicle and take an initiative check. If passed, they land standing. If failed, they become prone and pinned and suffer a hit as though they fell from the height of the vehicle, increasing the strength, AP, and damage by 1 if the vehicle was mobile. When a vehicle is wrecked, you roll a d6 for lasting damage. On a 1, it gets +1 to future lasting damage rolls. On a 2, it's -1 to all handling checks. On a 3, at the start of every battle, you roll a d6 for each unreliable result the vehicle has taken. If any is a 1, it won't start and can't take place in the battle. 4 is a movement reduction of 1 inch. 5 is a reduction of toughness in each location by 1. 6 is a reduction of hull points by 1. And finally, 7, which can only be achieved if you gain the persistent rattle damage. You write off the vehicle. It cannot be driven until it is repaired. There's also a crew injury table that's slightly different from the fighter injury table. The initial results of 11 through 46 are all the same, but because vehicles have slightly different stats for their crew than you would for a regular fighter, they have fewer total results. The crew can also be killed or retired, and the vehicle can be scrapped. Unfortunately, we don't really have an idea of how any of that's going to work in practical terms, what crew costs to hire, that kind of stuff, because we don't yet have Book of the Outlands, where I assume that information will actually be located. The quick start rules that came with the Ashway box are just kind of half-baked. They didn't really put much in there. Vehicles do have to take a loss of control test. That is brought up several times for various results. This is a handling check with any modifiers applied. And then if you pass, the driver maintains control of the vehicle. But if you fail, the driver has lost control. If stationary, the vehicle may turn or roll. And if mobile, the vehicle veers off course or rolls. You'll roll a loss of control dice and a d6. If you get a swerve result, the vehicle pivots around its central point 45 degrees. If you get a jackknife result, the vehicle pivots around its central point 90 degrees. And if you get a roll result, the vehicle is flipped by the force of the impact. In the case of a swerve or jackknife, the d6 tells you which direction to turn the vehicle. 1 to 3 is left, 4 to 6 is right. If the vehicle is mobile, it will also move forward half its movement characteristic. If a vehicle swerves or jackknifes, any fighters not in transport areas must test to avoid falling. When a vehicle rolls, if it is stationary and you get a roll result, you're going to flip it onto the side or the roof. If it's mobile, you're first going to roll a scatter die and a D3. The scatter determines the direction the vehicle will be rolling in. You use the little arrow on the hit result if you get a hit. And the D3 determines the number of rolls it makes in that direction. Move 2 inches in the directions of the scatter die for each roll. It can cause collisions while rolling and, of course, can hit fighters, so make sure you resolve all of that. In the end phase of every round, you will take a restart test for any stalled vehicles. You make a handling check and you add +1 if the vehicle has more than 1 hull point. If it's passed, it becomes mobile. If it's failed, the vehicle remains stalled. A vehicle that takes lasting damage can be repaired. You will take it to the chop shop and roll a d6 to determine the cost. And if you pay, all prior lasting damage is removed from the vehicle. On a 1 to 3 result, you pay 50% of the cost of the vehicle, including upgrades, but not war gear or weapons. But of course, the vehicle does take a lasting persistent rattle result. On a 4 to 5, you pay 50%, but you don't gain the persistent rattle. And on a 6, you get to only pay 25%, and you don't gain any other status. So that about covers it. That's everything we have so far for vehicles. It's a lot. It will take some practice, some memorizing, some learning. But once you actually get a chance to play with them, let me tell you, they are so good. So good. I can't sum it up. I can't convey how fun that game was. I'm so proud of the work that they did to make this rule set. I was nervous about adding rules complexity on top of a game that's already got a lot going on. And I do think that it will take a bit of practice to get these rules down. So I think people should expect to be a little bit overwhelmed going into your first game. It's okay. These rules are really fun, and as you start to use them, they make a lot of sense. Once I've got a sheet for all of the references and everything, I will post it in the description of this video so that you can easily access all the different tables and stuff on your phone or device, because I know there's a lot of people like me who do not want to reference a paper book when playing a game. And of course, I want to take a moment to thank my patrons who help me make these videos possible. You too can become a patron for as little as $2 a month. Just hop on over to patreon.com/domerunners and you can support the show. And of course, don't forget to check out the Dome Runners podcast. I haven't done an update in a little while because I have been so busy making videos, but I have an episode that I should be posting very soon. And as always, everybody stay safe and don't forget to change your paint water.